Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Daily AI Show. Today is October 13th, 2025. And with me today is Andy, and I'm Brian. And today we're going to be talking about a couple different topics. One, we're going to start with the news and discuss some of the things that Andy and I found personally interesting in the news over the weekend, or maybe even this morning. It depends on when things hit. We're going to be diving into Perplexity, but specifically Perplexity has a new Gmail and Outlook email connector. This isn't necessarily something that's brand new, that only Perplexity has, but I wanted to talk about it, especially in the context of Comet, which is their browser, and I've been using that for a while as well, and just talk about how those interplay together. And then we're finally going to talk in a segment about shadow AI, but specifically some new reports that have come out with some really damning numbers in terms of how people are using and sharing PII, personal identifying information, right? PII, personal information, through various different AIs, ChatGPT being the far and away leader. So we'll talk about that as well. But before we get into those topics, Perplexity and email and all that, let's kind of kick it off, Andy, with some news of the morning. I got a few here up on my desk, but I'd love to start with you. And what did you kind of feel like is one of the main news stories you wanted to cover this morning?
Yeah, well, So the news that I really tweaked on this morning was the rumor, but based on a leaked memo on Reddit, that Gemini 3 is coming out.
I saw that. Yeah.
And coming out on October 22nd specifically. Now, Gemini 2.5 Pro is right up there at the top of the leaderboards in lots of ways. And so, and it's been a long time since Gemini 2.5 Pro has come out, at least in the context of how infrequently or frequently, depending on your perspective, these new frontier models get their next generation of training and improvements. So the early testers who are in this leaked memo say it's edging out Gemini 2.5 Pro, edging, so it's an incremental improvement. But also beating Anthropic's Sonnet 4.5 on coding. So they expect that it's also going to, when it releases, it'll bundle Gemini 3.3 Pro with Nano Banana and VO 3.1 to allow for a really sophisticated multimodal creation and generation. So that's in this advancement of the main sort of benchmark leading frontier models. Nate Jones put out a video. Nate Jones we quote frequently on here because he's a really very sophisticated and really well informed and really great reasoner around AI issues of every kind. He's making the point that it's no longer really about advancing the model's reasoning. That's not what it's about. It's more about how does that already capable AI reasoning model integrate with and coordinate with connectors? How does it manage inference costs for the user by routing tasks to competent smaller models in order to reduce the overall burden, not only on your wallet, but also on the inference provider's wallet. And then also importantly, how it simplifies their use in the user experience design in connection with your workspace tools. Like how well and or ill does it work with that? And on that point, I just want to quickly tell a quick story about my working with Gemini in Sheets last night. I tried to get Gemini in Sheets to just take a tab on a multi-tab sheet that was representative of last year's data for a client and take a classification into expense categories on that as a training model, and then apply the same data but absent that classification to the expense category on another tab that had just the raw data, but in exactly the same format. Oh man, an hour later, Gemini gave up and complaining about all kinds of issues it has with limitations that are created by the fact that every time it would create using Python, it would create the classifications. By the time it went to try to create this, an output format in various attempts and tries, the memory had wiped out. So it no longer had access to that. So it'd have to try to start again and try to make that happen within a really short frame of time, trying to increase its efficiency. And finally, it just said, these are limitations. I was amazed because you'd think that Gemini in Google Sheets would not be facing those kinds of coordination problems.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going to Claude, and it was Claude could do it because Claude has a connection to my Google Drive and it has access to those sheets. So I was able to do it in Claude. Claude also had some problems trying to figure out how to output the result. So this is all just to reinforce my point that it's not anymore about how well that model underneath it actually can code and create that. It's how does it work with you?
Right. No, I agree with you. And I mean, I think back to what somebody else we quote a lot, Matt Wolf said, and this is, I don't know, probably 2 months ago, 3 months. He's like, I think I'm going to stop making videos specifically about model improvements or benchmarks. He said, because number one, there's a new benchmark every day. Number two, it does feel, even though you have sort of the blind tests, it does feel like a lot of this, every new one comes out, they're always at the top of the benchmark. And you're like, well, are they training to the benchmark? Are they doing so many runs until they obviously achieve those numbers? And it feels, I don't know, fake, but it feels a little managed.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so I kind of agreed with him. And it was just sort of I don't think I'm going to make content about this. I don't think that's what we should be doing. And I agree with you. It really is now. The models are smart. Now it's comprehension. Now it's the reasoning. Now it's mixture of experts, as you were showing it last week. And when you present a problem like Sheets, that it's not looking at it like linearly, it's not a straight line, that it will perhaps in time be able to look at what you're asking from multiple different angles and come up with a single solution that's going to work the first time. Because I agree with you. I haven't really added Sheets. I haven't really added Claude or messed with Claude inside of Excel, nor do I really see a bunch of news about, oh my God, this is revolutionizing Excel. So I'm not saying they don't help, but I do find that they are lacking a little bit. Like they're just not there when it comes to being that helpful AI assistant that we will eventually have. But this is a bit of a roadblock to it. I do want to bring up really quick, just circling back to the Gemini. I can't validate this, but I'm just going to pull this up just because I found it interesting as part of the Gemini 3. This person on X, again, I can't validate it. They were talking about Gemini 3 can compose original music. Listen to it here. But I can't tell you whether this could just be made up, right? But let's go ahead and play it, and so you can just get a feel for it, and then we can talk about it. Can you hear that, Andy? If I play it?
Very, very soft.
Let me turn this up a little bit. Okay, let's try this. Yeah. Now, listen, I played something similar to that last night and just made it up. So I'm not that impressed with that. I mean, this is me noodling around on a piano. So, I mean, whatever. No, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, it seems probable, I guess, right, Andy? We would say like, yep, that sounds like somewhere it's going. And this is going to reignite even more conversations about, how far can AI get into the creative process? And, if this ends up being the case and it can create net new pieces of piano, whatever you would call these, new pieces of piano or other music, that's going to be interesting, especially if it's writing the music. What's that?
I said, let's call it a concerto.
Yeah, I was going to use that word, and I was like, I don't know enough to know whether that's the right word for it or not. But regardless, it's going to bring up more conversations. But I think, Andy, the way I look at this is like, yeah, you should be able to see this coming. And this is not the end either. This right now might be, it says can compose original music. Can it compose an entire orchestra of original music where all the instruments are playing their own pieces and they come together? I mean, probably. Will it be able to compose entire movies by consuming the visuals and finding out the exact way that it should do the highs and lows? And an editor someday will have 5, 6 different versions of how a movie might be scored. And that all could be done with AI. And then we're going to fight. Yep. Human score, people who do scores, Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor and his partner, what they just did with the latest Tron movie, and they've been very successful in doing scores, or your Hans Zimmermans or otherwise. I don't know, and then people are going to want to know, well, how is it trained and how did it learn to do this? So we'll see if Gemini 3 comes out here in the next, I guess that would be about 10 days-ish, 9 days based on what they were suggesting, but interesting nonetheless. And look, they're going to wrap in Nano Banana, right? They're going to wrap in some of the other things that Gemini has been very good at lately. I'm here for it, especially if it makes their deep research even better, because as I've said 1,000 times, I'm already blown away with 2.5 Pro's deep research. So if 3 is better than that, that's icing for me. That'll be really, really impressive. I want to make sure I say hey to Greg. Hey, Greg, in the comments. There are no benchmarks. Music production is a process. So Greg is kind of saying in the comments as well. We'll see what happens with it. All right, let me jump into a couple other news things really quick here. I couldn't decide, Andy, whether I feel like this is AI, but anyway, maybe tangential. So remember Neuralink, that's one of Elon Musk's companies, but obviously many, many other people are involved in it. It's not just him. And they did the brain implant where they do the fibers to the neurons. And you might recognize the guy on the screen. He was like the first person to have it. He was able to, they demonstrated him being able to like play chess and things like that on a virtual, like on a website. Well, this was really impressive to me because they've clearly made progress here. And on the screen, if you're not watching with us, that's okay. But he is actually talking while he's using his mind to move this robotic arm that's got a cup in it. And he actually has people laughing in this scene, which is pretty funny because he's pontificating and saying he can use his hand now to make gestures, like, as if somebody was taking off their glasses to make a point, and you can hear people laughing in this little clip that he did, which I thought was really funny of him to do that. But he was basically saying, like, now I can use my cup and make a point about it, and pause and have dramatic pauses and all these things. He's a quadriplegic. So all these things that he was obviously previously not able to do. The reason why I decided to bring it up, because I wasn't sure how much AI is involved in the models behind Neuralink, and I wasn't sure there. But I thought, Andy, is an interesting progress to be made. Number one, just on its own, holy moly, for what that might do for many, many people who are paralyzed in many different ways. Phenomenal, right? Like, I love seeing this progress, but also what it makes me think, not dystopian, but it makes me think we're manipulating robotic arms with our mind. It's possible. Now, he has a permanent, like, link to his brain. This is not a helmet. This is not, Magneto from the X-Men movies. This is, he's got permanent, like, surgery to do this. But it does beg the question, how much further in the future is this before people are able to command entire robots with their mind, entire military machines with their minds and stuff like that? What does that mean? What does that do? Does it save people? Does it hurt people? There's like that. My mind kind of spiraled on this, and not really for the news. I think that's probably its own other conversation, but interesting nonetheless.
Well, I'll say that there is certainly AI in the interface between the Neuralink, biomechanical combination in order to articulate the robot arm. There has to be something that's working very fast and smoothing out the movements and all of those things. And there's clearly a type of AI, even if it's just machine learning.
Right.
And then the other point is that there are a number of other companies that have far less invasive, non-implanted interfaces for brain-computer interface, or BCI. And so, yes, we're going to get very quickly to the point where not only for disabled people, but for you in your workspace, you will have some kind of connection that's silent, doesn't require a keyboard or your voice, where you can articulate something on the screen just with wearing something that's as simple as a baseball cap, as we are today.
Yeah. I mean, are we going to get there with the glasses? If they're sitting next to the, the temporal lobe, or against the side of your head? Will they be able to pick up vibrations or energy transfers and all these energy pathways and stuff? It's really interesting to see where this goes. I agree with you. Right now, and maybe for many people, having an actual surgical implant is going to be the right solution, even further into the future. But I agree with you. There's so many startups that are currently working on this that it really makes it interesting. I'll bring up one really quick one and then I'll pass it back to you, but this is just a quick one. AI agent startup N8N valued at 2.5 billion after Series C. So you guys hear us talk about NAN quite a bit. They just had a Series C and they raised 180 million in their new funding, which now they're saying gives them a value of 2.5 billion. Based out of Germany, N8N helps companies develop and deploy agentic AI automations. I've been using N8N. We use it as part of the Daily AI show, but I use it for all my work as well. Going back many months now. I had somebody else mention the name N8N. I didn't really know what it was. I kind of looked into it. It was somebody I respected in the AI community. I thought, and I was working with him, and I thought, well, if he's doing it, there must be something here. And I kind of been playing around in Make, and I had built stuff on this show, and I knew I could do it in Zapier, but Make was easier. Well, there was a bit of a learning curve, and there is definitely a bit of a bell to N8N. But once you sort of get into it, and honestly, the AI models have become so good at coding that you can now quite literally ask about any question to Claude or Gemini or OpenAI to get answers on how to do quick coding and stuff. So I've even found N8N to be even easier than it was in the past. Just since I've started using it, they've now had many more connectors in there. Probably not as many as Zapier, but there's tons of them. For instance, when I first built my first Salesforce connector with Scaled and we deployed that out to clients, I had to do Perplexity through HTTP requests. And now there's a Perplexity node. Just simplifies things a little bit. I had to go out. I had to replace all my nodes and put in the official Perplexity one with the OAuth connector. But it simplified things quite a bit because you're now not putting your API key into each HTTP node. So little things like that have gone a long way. Happy to see them. I'm not really sure how big their mode is. Obviously, we saw the announcements from Agent Builder with OpenAI and others, like we talked about Opal, and they're not N8N killers. They're not Zapier killers. We already talked about that. That doesn't mean they won't be, though, someday, that they won't have the ability to do all the things. I'm not running from N8N. I'm happy to see they're succeeding because I want to keep building in there. I think they're pretty impressive, but we'll have to see. We've seen these valuations before, and 2 years later, people are like, N8 who? It goes quick. So we'll see if they can stick around or not.
Yeah, they made a big splash, and they have a very large number of users who have achieved much more sophisticated workflow automations in enterprise using N8N than could otherwise be accomplished with Zapier alone, for example, which has been around for a long time, even at the rudimentary stages of sort of business, the sort of data transfer integrations across different elements of your corporate stack. And then Agent Kit or Agent Builder, I guess it's called, which is ChatGPT-5's workflow.
Visual builder.
It's kind of, when it came out, it was called an N8N or Zapier killer, right, by a lot of the different influencers. But you can now do something that's a lot easier than learning how to articulate N8N, which, by the way, added access to an agentic decision maker in the workflow by putting in a connector, an agent node that you can use to connect to any number of models out there to provide logic and reasoning and selective conditional branching or tool use. That's one of the key advances of N8N from the earlier forms like Zapier. But now you can use ChatGPT's Agent Builder to connect to a Zapier MCP, right? So the MCP that's out there, you just connect ChatGPT's Agent Builder to that, and now you have access to 8,000 different application integrations that exist, but they're all simple integrations.
They're simple, and they're not necessarily always passing information the right way. That's my biggest issue with them right now, is like everybody thinks MCP is like just the obvious answer to like replacing API, and it's not, and so anyway, I see that too, Andy, and people make a big deal about it. And I always think like, that's not as big of a deal. It's cool, but it's not like the one connector to rule them all. Once you can connect to Zapier MCP does not mean it's the same thing as like either of them, N8N, it wouldn't matter, N8N or Agent Builder, necessarily all of a sudden being able to talk to and rewrite and write back to now thousands of different, anything inside the Zapier, space.
Good skeptic. Now, Karl has joined us.
Yeah.
Good morning, Karl. And
What's
Karl actually builds workflow automations for customers. So let's get his point of view on that.
What I've been really doing is I've been trying to see if I can move my automations or replicate my automations from N8N to Claude Code. So I think it could do quite a bit of it. The only thing I don't have is a scheduled trigger, but I think that's scheduled actions is one of the key feature requests into Claude Code. So it's kind of neat. And I think what enables this all to happen actually is an MCP. Not Zapier's MCP is it's too slow because it has to obviously go through Zapier first. And then the tooling call in Zapier is kind of hit or miss. You're like, well, I don't have that. But you obviously have to be very careful about third-party MCPs because of all the either prompt injections or rug pulls or things like that. You have to be. But if you find a very good one, it's so much faster. Like you compare, for example, I was doing a YouTube analysis for somebody, and it wasn't a client, it was just to review. You did a YouTube channel analysis with a YouTube MCP with Zapier, and it doesn't come back with all the data you want. But if you go through like a native one that not a native one, somebody just third party built, comes back faster, came back with a lot more data. So just things like that you have to kind of be aware of. But I do notice it's easier to install an MCP in Claude Code than it would be even in Claude, where you have to do a little bit more work, not as much. And it's actually harder to do it in ChatGPT because your server has to be hosted somewhere. So you can't just go to GitHub and be like, hey, pull this SMP. You actually have to put it somewhere, local drive and so on. So there's a couple of different things, but everything has its own uses, right? So which is the best tool to do this? And just make sure you're open to changing said tool, because for example, I've been using Whisperflow, right? There's actually a company called Paraspeech where you don't have to pay, you only pay once, and it's automatically in your Mac. And I've been using it a little bit, and it's pretty good. But as whether you're individual company, I think that's the kind of things you can't be stuck to one or the other. You've got to be able to adapt, because these things come pretty quick. So it's kind of
fun. No, I agree. All right, well, let's do maybe since Karl, you joined us, Andy, if you got another news story, and Karl, if you happen to have a news story, let's do that, and then we'll sort of wrap up this segment and move on to the other stuff. But Andy, you got another one?
I do. This is worth mention because it's like on all of the newsletters this morning. There's the talent revolving door that's happening with Meta's poaching major players in the world of AI researchers with astoundingly high equity promises for leaving wherever they are and joining Meta and the super intelligence labs that he's building to try to take on OpenAI in the world of AI. So if you remember, OpenAI's chief technology officer, Mira Murati, left OpenAI and formed her own company called Thinking Machines Labs. And she left with a co-founder, Andrew Tulloch. And now Friday, it was announced that he's leaving to join Meta. And so it's just amazing. And I also read in that context that and Meta, by the way, disputes this, but somebody said that they had knowledge that the equity value of the equity participation being offered to people at that level, like a co-founder of a major lab out there, is in the vicinity of $1 billion or $1.5 billion, if things work well for Meta. Now, it's hard to imagine that the scale of equity shares that are involved in that, if it's Meta's shares rather than some kind of phantom share that's focused on the Meta Superintelligence Lab, because Meta as a stock value is not going to increase that much. So the way stock options work is you get the options now at a strike price that's related to the current value, and you participate in the sort of the increase in the value of that stock. So anyway, who knows? But there's lots of money flowing around, and people are on a round trip in many cases like this, where they leave one company and rejoin again. By the way, Andrew Tullock was previously at Meta, so that's why I say revolving door. He's coming back to Meta now from Thinking Labs.
Yeah, and I mean, layered on top of that is the laws, outlawing what's it called when people would put restrictions on who you could work for next, competitors and stuff like that.
And so anti-competitor, terms in your employment agreement.
Yeah, and they've outlawed a lot of that and said that can't stand. And so now you really have opened the door, not just in AI, across the business world, about people being able to jump from one to the next. And be interesting how this goes. I mean, AI is a bit of a revolving door, lots of money there. And, I don't know, like to your point, like whether bringing, Meta paying somebody 20, 30 million. And we look at it. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff said non-competes. Couldn't come up with it on a Monday. Thanks. Our chat is always there for us. Thank you guys. when I don't have the word non-competes. Thank you. But it'd be interesting to see, where this goes, because I might look at it from the outside and say that's crazy to give so and so 20 million, even maybe in his case, to come back or whatever. But the reality is there's so much at stake here that really may not be that big of a bet for Meta, to do that if it's the right person and they bring a certain quality to a team, So interesting to say the least. All right, Karl, let's wrap it up with you. Do you happen to have a news story you want to share?
Yeah, just one. It's from Reuters, October 8th. It was it's from EY, or it used to be Ernst & Young. So I was like, I don't understand this. You call your company EY, but it used to be Ernst & Young. But I'm like, okay. Anyway, they conducted a survey among 975 executives overseeing AI companies. And then what they found was they had a total combined loss estimated at 4.4 billion, with metrics against revenue growth, cost savings, employee satisfaction. It's just that the value. So AI, the quote is, AI is absolutely improving efficiency, productivity. People are doing more faster, but the value capture lags because the gains are being reinvested into doing more work, not necessarily into cutting costs or driving immediate revenue. So the headline was kind of weird because most companies suffer some risk-related financial loss deploying AI. So that's what the headline was.
Yeah.
So, but it was a little bit more nuanced in terms of like what sometimes it's very hard to quantify exactly, like from a revenue perspective, the amount of money you put in versus the revenue you get out of it. It's hard when you're like, okay, well, our admin doesn't have to spend 10 hours a month no longer doing this task because AI is doing it. Like, how do you quantify that?
We feel that at scale. We have to be really diligent about, if we are going in to help, obviously, and do Salesforce and it's emails or something like that, we will go with the client and set up those reports early. Number one, we want to see where the numbers are today, because we want to be able to show that ROI. And it's tough with AI sometimes, because kind of like a marketing campaign or something where it's broad in general, not, let's say it's not to convert somebody to a new class or course or something. That is easy, right? Like, oh, I see them, they click through the funnel. But a lot of times it's just general awareness of the company. And those are always very hard to put a finger on and say, well, it made this kind of impact or whatever. So, we see that too as a consulting agency, obviously, like, and I'm sure you do as well, Karl. It's like, it's in our best interest to set up those reports and those dashboards early, because we want to show how much AI is having an impact on it. And if we don't capture that, or if the client's not thinking that, well, that kind of hurts us. It might burn us because the client comes back later and says, well, prove it. It's like, well, we could have had we set up those reports, So we sort of learned through that as well, and we try to get better with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot here real quick. We're going to go into a different segment. I want to talk really quick because this came out in the news maybe a week or two ago. It wasn't that long ago, and it was just basically Perplexity now allow you to connect to Gmail and to Outlook. And truthfully, this is, I think, has been around for a little bit. There's other tools that do this. So it's not like Perplexity is the first. That's not what this intent is. It's really just like kind of going back to your story earlier, Andy, about Gemini in Sheets. It's like, well, where would that be helpful? Because if I have Perplexity linked up to my email, what kind of insights, where would that help me? So I immediately started thinking, well, it can look at your email, it can look at your calendar. Those are both valuable to me as a consultant. I am on, right now, I'm on 8 different projects with 8 different clients that all have different deadlines and needs and necessities and IT issues and God knows whatever else. And so my brain is always switching from client to client to client to client to client as we get busier with Scaled. And so I know I'm always looking for tools that are going to help me quickly summarize not just transcripts anymore, but even whole conversations. And while I can't really show because of client confidentiality, I did pull this up and I felt like it was probably fine to share. So 2 things here, and I'm going to show you 2 different ways that this can work. I'm currently in the Comet browser. That's the browser built by Perplexity. So you do not have to, by the way. It's not like this only works. I'm going to show you why I'm showing it to you here. I have been using Comet quite a bit. I've said openly on this show, I don't know that they have a large enough moat that when Chrome has all this stuff built in that I would continue to stay with Comet, but I do like it. And by the way, it's built on Chromium. So like all your features and functionality come over anyway from the Chrome infrastructure. So it feels that way. I do love though, for Comet that like I can just put something up in the search bar and it's basically like using Perplexity. The downside is when you know the website you want to go to and Perplexity is like, let me do a search. And you're like, no, I just wanted to go to T-Mobile. And it's like, T-Mobile is a telecommunication company. And it's like, okay, Perplexity needs to do a little better with its routing of when I say the T-Mobile website, just take me to the T-Mobile website to do it, So there's that side of it. But let's get back to the email here because you can see if you're looking at my screen, what it says is just a basic Perplexity search. Looking at my calendar in September, what projects was I working on the most? And I think this was a reasonably decent answer. I don't think it's super detailed. I'd be curious if I went in deeper, but a couple things came up. Asana integration. Yeah, I absolutely was working on that in September because we were working on CSV imports. How we do things called our AI impact reports is it's when we talk to our clients about whatever our current project is, we also go all the way through all the GTM departments, customer success, sales, marketing, right? And RevOps. And we interview basically very much the way you do it 0 to 60, Karl. And we uncover lots of other ways we think AI might be able to be helpful. And then we do these impact reports. And anyway, long story short, we were trying to find faster ways to integrate that with Asana, which is our project management tool inside of Scaled. N8N automation, you can see here, investigating why 11 Labs wasn't appearing in N8N. And trying to figure out that because I do have a client, I've talked about this a little bit, where I've talked about both of these, which is why I didn't mind them being on here. But I'm building a voice agent with a client, or I should say I've built a voice agent for a client. It's already out there and functioning, working, and we're continuing to go on to like phase 2 with it. But I was working through N8N. Now, was it the majority of my September? No, I think Perplexity kind of missed on that. But it's true. It's just not maybe super indicative of it. I would have expected to actually see quite a bit of my client names on this one because that's what would really be on my calendar in September was a bunch of blocks of me working with different clients. But the last one to put up there was about I am working with another client on using TomTom traffic data. I always joke and say, yes, TomTom's still around. And they have some really good API traffic data. So, it worked. It was fine. What did my last email from TomTom reveal about the API process? And weirdly here, it's like, well, we didn't really see that, but here's what I find interesting about that. So as an example, if you are in Comet, you can just hit the assistant up here in the corner and that opens up this on the side. And I said the same thing. What did my last email say from TomTom? And it actually did a really good job here. It's like your TomTom email sent on October 13th was a reply from Camille Nawaki at TomTom Technical. Here's what it said. They were saying, hey, this is a technical support. So I guess I emailed the wrong person. I'm trying to find like pricing information for my client because I built the thing and I'm like, hey, I'm on a 30-day trial. Can you help me out here? And so this was sort of a nice wrap up. So if you are in the comment browser, you could just use the assistant and it will work just the same. It's integrated. If I was just in regular Perplexity and logged in on Chrome, then I could still have it, like we're seeing here where it's connected directly to my email. So just wanted to share that really quick as a quick demo, but more I think just really quick, guys, we can have a quick conversation here about what does this mean? And this is going to go into our next topic about shadow AI and things going on in some news reports there. But, this is Perplexity. It's not an enterprise account. I do have Perplexity attached to my email. It's very helpful to me as a user and as somebody with what I do. Like I said, I'm on multiple different projects. And so I see a lot of value in it. I couldn't share the stuff that was straight up client based, obviously, but it's there. I just didn't want to bring it up on screen. So it is helpful to me, but it does bring up that conversation about, number one, again, this isn't much of a moat if Chrome, who is Google and owns Gemini, has already built into Gmail and my calendar and all the Google Suite stuff. But even if you were Microsoft and you were doing all that as well, they have that directly integrated with Copilot.
Yeah, let me share my screen. I did the same thing with Perplexity.
Great.
You'll need to put that up. I'm not in as an admin. So once you have that up, so I just asked it. The prompt to this one was just find 2025 correspondence with a specific individual. Mm-hmm. That was my prompt to Perplexity, and it looked at my Gmail and then came back with this full summary of all of the things that we had as an exchange. It was quite good.
Good.
But, by the way, since I'm using Gmail does the same thing. Gemini's right over here on the right. So here's a more detailed, sort of chronological history of those exchanges with her. And so that's to your point, Brian, that you can stop the share now. Or I guess I have to do that.
I got you.
I guess that's to your point that, Perplexity's addition isn't so much a moat because, obviously if you're connecting to get to Gmail, well, so lots of other things have Gmail connectors, at least for this research and summarization function. Now, what's really more interesting is which of these tools can actually do things in your email for you. And for example, Claude Code can do that, right? Claude Code can actually generate and send an email for you in Gmail. And I could not find a way to have Gemini do that. So again, back to my whine about Gemini being lame when it came to just doing some analysis on a sheet. I'm not in the practice of using Gemini when I'm looking at or reviewing my inbox. So I like the idea that it's built into Perplexity. And one of the things that's really impressive about Perplexity is how broad their useful tool set is. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things in Perplexity. And I think I'm not giving up any one of my subscriptions to any of these AI systems now because I think we're still early enough in the process that I'm fear of missing out. I don't want to miss out if ChatGPT 5 or 6, has some cool new user interface design that's going to make things really easy. I want to experience that. But right now, I'd say you can get almost anything and everything you need by subscribing to Perplexity.
I mean, I agree. You can use any of the models, right? You can switch between the different models. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but we talk about multi-agent and stuff like that. Perplexity for a long time, if you just leave it on its default, is in the background picking what it feels like the right model is. So it might be switching into Sonnet. You don't even really realize it, because it thinks that's the better answer. Not to mention Sonar and Sonar Pro and Sonar Deep Research, their own models are very powerful as well. Before we leave the Perplexity side, Karl, I'm just curious, do you use Perplexity or Comet or, and not even just Perplexity, I'm sure you do, but I mean, like, have been using the browser at all or the email functions?
Okay, so this is you want to record this, because the only time I'll say something good about Microsoft Copilot. Microsoft Copilot, in that function, what you just did, where it's like, hey, review my email, because of the Microsoft Graph and connected in Copilot. And I don't think very many people know you can do this. If you have it for your work, the connection is so good that what you just did, you know how like the outcome you got and the outcome you got, Andy, it was decent. But when I saw, like, it's so integrated that not only because it has GPT-5, whatever, but it doesn't only just give you an overview of like your calendar or your emails. It breaks it down so well. Like it like has so much detail. And then I think the only functionality they don't have is in Copilot. It's like, hey, I want you to draft whatever. It doesn't go into your draft, which I'm sure it's not going to be hard for Microsoft to do that. So you're in Copilot, you can just start sending emails and whatnot. So that's the only, like, that is a function because of how deeply it's connected. I don't think anything beats that particular function, no matter what MCP it is. It's too natively integrated, that Copilot and your Outlook and your calendar and the files too, right? Because it says everything. But I've never, in all my time training on Copilot, working with enterprise clients, I've seen anyone actually use that function in Copilot to do that. I've never seen that before.
Does that feature of Copilot require that you be on Outlook?
Well, yeah, because if you you automatically have Outlook. So any Microsoft shop automatically has this built in, right?
And I totally see the value in that, because I work with a couple of Microsoft clients as well, and same thing. We're a Google shop. Same thing though. Man, does it get easy when it's so reliable that you can just ask a simple question and it brings up not only your team's conversations, but it knows how they interact with your Outlook conversations, and also your Copilot history, frankly. And then your Copilot team history, like where you've had shared team instances. You imagine if the system gets smart enough, like you're saying, and they will. I mean, this is just a future thing, where you can ask really intelligent, like nuanced questions and get back almost perfect or near perfect answers that are bringing in just a swarm of different information. And then layering in things like SharePoint. I mean, that is the goal, right? People are like, it's answering your question, but it's like, I looked at the web, I looked at OneDrive, I looked at SharePoint, I looked at Teams, I looked at Outlook, I looked at your Copilot. I know what you said in other people Copilot. Like that becomes super, super powerful. And getting back to Perplexity, I don't know when my 1 year thing comes back for Perplexity. I will re-up for another year if it was today. So, and I do love Comment. I do. I use Comment quite a bit over the last month or so, and I don't really see me going away from it. So it's nice that it's there. And Perplexity's point is like, well, you have the tool where you already are. Because to your point, Andy, you had to go back over to Gmail, and that might have interrupted your flow. And if I'm just sort of vibe working, not even coding, but vibe working, and I'm in a zone and I'm already using Perplexity for deep research, stuff like that, there is value of me being able to pull into that thread something I was dealing with a client, and I keep moving. For instance, the Asana and N8N or the TomTom data. Pull in what I know and what's going on, and let's keep going with the research. I never leave Perplexity. I never get distracted by seeing another screen, going into Gmail and seeing that I have 4 other unread emails and one says urgent, and now I'm not even on the project I was, you know what I mean? There's a lot to be said for like keeping focused on a particular goal. And so I see Perplexity's value there. I just don't think necessarily, we'll have to see. I think they're wonderful, and I don't see myself getting rid of them, but I'm curious if Perplexity is there for the long term, or if they're going to perhaps be bought out one day by one of the other players, like an Amazon or something like that. So be curious to see. All right. Well, listen, let's pivot here to the other segment I just want to talk about. And it's actually a good transition. That's why I wanted to do them both today. And we've talked about this idea of shadow AI. Shadow AI being about AI being used and not in ways that, let's say, upper management or company might not know it's being used. We know that there are tons of people who there's no real governance policy in place. And so people just use whatever AI tool of choice. It's overwhelmingly, says the stats, OpenAI and ChatGPT. Overwhelmingly, like 2/3 of people use that tool, which is, talk about market penetration and their ability to be the predominant tool. That may not stay. But the point of this segment is really just to talk about what I saw come up in the news, and I thought that sounds high, and I just wanted to get some clarification. And it said that 77% of all sensitive data leaks inside organizations now come from employees copying information into AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude. And it says it's not a doom story or whatever, like Perplexity got a little ahead of itself there. But the point of why I wanted to bring this up was I thought that sounded high to me. So I did bring up, I was like, well, where did this come from? Because trust but verify, right? And so it actually did come from a report. I'm going to pull up the first blog that it came from, was Business Insurance. And it says study finds. So then we're going to click into this study here really quick. Show this on screen. So now this is getting into the one that the Business Intelligence Report did. And it comes from, tell me the name of the company. Layer X. It's an Israeli-based Layer X security. Found that 77% of employees paste company data into generative artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT, with 82% of this activity occurring through personal accounts that bypass corporate oversight, cybersecurity news reported. And then if you get into this cybersecurity news article, because again, just trying to follow the source here, we have that Layer X. And they did look, it says they, analysts identified these patterns through comprehensive monitoring of enterprise browser activity, providing unprecedented visibility into employer interactions with AI platforms. So first thing first, I was like, well, where did this come from? Like who did this data? Is this somebody just kind of guessing at this? But it seems to be backed by at least, reports and looking at, anonymized data or whatever the case is. But I think it just brings up the bigger conversation. Honestly, the Perplexity Gmail is perfect. That's why I wanted these together. I am using Perplexity to do research. Now, I'm not copying and pasting, but I am using it to help me. Now, in my particular case, my company is aware of what I'm doing. I lead AI at scale, so my company is aware of what I'm doing and how I'm using it to be better at my job. But it's this weird conversation to have. People are using it on their personal accounts. So there's really no oversight or governance. That's the shadow part of it. The management does not have a handle on what's happening. Now, if you are on a you're not a government, if you're on a work computer, it's very possible you might have signed over your rights to the fact that they can look at everything on your clipboard, everything in your browser, everything that you copy and paste. If you're using a work computer, there's plenty of people who know that pretty much anything you do on that computer, any keystroke, is being tracked in some way. That we know that's the case. And if that's the case, then obviously some things could be tracked. But really what happens when it goes off device, when somebody's using their phone and checking on something really quick and they're pulling up maybe information about a client because they're trying to do research or whatever the case is, and there's really no way to do it. And so what this article pointed out was, well, prohibition is not like blocking it completely is not the right solution here because it's going to happen anyway. And the stats that I saw said that it was like at least 45% are people are using ChatGPT or similar tools for work and their daily use. And that's projected to be above 75% by 2026 or 2027. So what do you do if you're in charge of this? How do you handle governance? How do you handle shadow AI? Saying no to it doesn't do anything. It just spreads the wildfire. People are going to use these tools. They're going to find ways around it because it makes them more productive. Also, the companies are getting the benefit of more productive employees and may not understand that that's part of it. So shutting it down could have a real negative impact on the business that they don't even realize. It could really hurt their bottom line, because you have people who are now more productive in their own ways. The problem is who's controlling where the data goes. IT can't control it. There's not governance in place and it moves so fast. So just curious to get your guys' feedback here as we sort of get to the end of the show. But like, I'd love to hear what you guys think on this.
Well, what that study found by continuous observation of browser activity was that employees are using their own personal accounts on the browser and putting company information that should be retained only into the company firewalled environment. They're putting it into ChatGPT, for example, in order to get some value out of it, as you're saying. Like it's helping them do a summarization, or it's providing new insights into analysis of whatever data that they're putting in there. The security risk question is not so much about the question of whether shadow AI has a net positive or net negative security risk, but who could actually exploit that? If I've put something into this huge engine, which is ChatGPT, how can my competitor or somebody else who's wanting to create an exploit around that information, how could they actually retrieve that from ChatGPT? I'm skeptical that putting something into ChatGPT automatically exposes that to being purloined by a competitor or someone else. It's not easy to extract that, but it could be that I'm naive, that there are tools that will look at something that's not built into the pre-training data, but is actually part of the transactional flow. Maybe they're snooping on the transactions, by sniffing the actual electronic interfaces that are going there. But that just seems like it's on the verge of conspiracy theory for me.
No, we talk about that with our clients a bit when we say, when someone there's myths and misconceptions of oh, if I put this financial data, this month's financial data, whether it's a competitor or somebody else looks for that specific financial data, that it'll just ChatGPT it's not like a database.
Right.
It's not like one big database that it's all file system and searches. But also whether I think every single time we have a meeting, the IT person for bigger companies says, oh yeah, we have this in place, we have Copilot in place. But when we go into our smaller discoveries, just by natural, people are just saying, well, I put this into ChatGPT, blah, blah, blah. And I look at Jeff and it's funny because it's like, oh, your IT told me that, your entire company only uses Copilot, and we've got 20, 50 different use cases of people saying, and then we're asked, oh, what's the matter with the Copilot? It's like, oh, it doesn't work, so I'm going to use this. Like, okay. And that's what we just hear, right? We just hear about that, and we sit there and we listen to that. But that's the thing is and I wrote a post about this yesterday, and it stemmed from Nate Jones talking about how, as a director, senior manager, so on, how the traditional thinking is, hey, each employee has a set amount of budget, right? A software budget, whatever that software budget is, they have to account for that, annualized budgeting, and so on. So here's the thought, though. I was like, okay, you probably, and I'm thinking this, tell me if you agree, I'm not sure if a $20 ChatGPT, $20 Claude, $20 Copilot is good enough. Because I think if you really want to supercharge your people, and obviously it depends on the use case, I think you're going to have to do a little bit better than that, give them more tools. I'm thinking you're going to have to spend training plus tools, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an employee. But that's still cheaper for, say, 20, 25 employees.
Annually? I'm just double checking. Annually, you're saying? Yeah, okay.
That's cheaper than hiring one additional employee for $100,000 plus benefits.
100%.
Not even question. That's not a question.
Not a question.
So if you properly train, we're not talking a basics training course and a lunch and learn here. We're talking invest in your team. If you actually invest, imagine you give Claude Max Pro, ChatGPT Pro, whatever it is, plus additional tools, plus a regular training that adds up to around $3,000, $4,000 per employee. Think of what that employee can do, 20 of them, 30 of them, versus one additional employee. It's like a 10x, 100x for that person. But I don't think people are thinking of that. They're like, okay, we're going to give a Copilot license, maybe a ChatGPT business license. We'll barely train them, but we'll still hire. But you know what we'll do? We'll also we'll also have these stupid CEOs that say, hey, you know what, we're going to be AI driven now. We're going to, you have to use AI wherever you use AI. And all those ridiculous statements, but you didn't actually put in the time to train, didn't put in the time to actually look at, hey, where are the places that you actually need to connect, and then expect people to do all this while juggling 6 deadlines, while having to think of, hey, I have a life outside of work too. Like, I don't think those connections, like, the reason why I'm getting a little worked up, because I saw this post by the CEO of Open Door at Reddit, and the first line was something about return to work, which I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Then the second line was, oh, everyone's going to be, we're an AI native company now, and you know, if you aren't using Cursor, if you aren't using Claude or whatever they have, then we got to have a discussion. And the best comment was, dude, you sell real estate. Like, what are you trying to prove? So it's like, you have all these things, but it doesn't make any sense, right? So I'm like, you're not investing properly, yet you're expecting people to do more with AI. It's such a clash of what AI can do and what a company should actually be looking for. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. And then on top of all of that, like, you know, not understanding how they're using it. You have the training and stuff like that too. I mean, I have a sports organization, I will say, not to get too narrow on it. And I have upcoming training this week with them to help with Copilot. One of the things when I got on my pre-call with them was, yeah, the sales team is kind of doing their own thing, but we've invested in Copilot, and we would really love it if you could help them understand why that's the better move here. And I was like, yep, heard, right? So I'm literally doing a training to help their team sort of corral people back towards Copilot, because they're using it for whatever use cases they are. And just something else you said, Karl, too, when it comes to like the training side, things are moving so quick, and this will be a topic on tomorrow's show as well. But when it comes to training to use the tools, you know, not 2 months ago when I was hiring and I was laying out who I wanted to hire because our team was expanding, it was like, well, I'd really love people who understand how to create assistants and agents and things like that. And also, it'd be great if they have some sales experience. You know what I learned? I was exactly opposite wrong. You know what I need? Sales experts. You know what I'll train them on? How to use AI. Because what I found out very quickly was they could go through all the process they could know how to build the tool. They could know how to throw something in and build it immediately, but they had no conceptual understanding of when it was done, was it even good? Because I'd be like, we can't send that to a client. And they'd be like, oh, why? I was like, for 1,000 reasons why that's not okay. You know, and then what I realized was when I trained one of my coworkers who's, working, and he got sped up in AI, his initial responses were brilliant. And I was like, oh, I had it backwards. So, you know, you talk about that training. And even in my experience, I realized that I was thinking about people with AI skills, not necessarily people who had in-session skills. And the report I'll be curious to see on this, not necessarily the shadow AI, is when are we going to see a report, Karl or Andy, that says, hey, we did this. We put governance in place. We fought back against shadow AI. This is how we tried to do it. And we even know we don't have this nailed, but this is our process in place. We've trained everybody. We did the $3,000 a year versus hiring one new employee. And now we have the data, because we've done surveys every single month or whatever, to prove that our employees are happier today than they were 1 year ago before we made this investment in them. And I really think if somebody puts in that effort, we're going to see those reports. And it's going to show that because of AI, no, people weren't necessarily getting overworked. Yes, productivity is going to go up. But what I think you're really going to see is people are generally happier in the work they're doing because they're doing more meaningful work and offloading more of the repetitive stuff that drags them down anyway to AI. And so their time is going to be spent doing more rewarding stuff that they actually find fulfilling, which would generally make them happier at work. So I'll be curious to see how this goes. But circling back to the initial, point of this kind of like this segment was, the data I'm showing really quick before we sort of wrap up is like 63% of breach organizations lack AI governance policies entirely. Only 17% of companies have technical controls to prevent data uploads to AI platforms. 97% of organizations that experienced AI-related breaches lacked proper access controls. And among companies claiming comprehensive AI governance, independent research shows only 9% actually have working systems. So even the companies that are saying we do have a process in place probably don't. They don't have it as controlled. And so the question really comes like, what are you going to do? How are you going to go back and decide to work against governance? And there is no great, easy answer here. I don't think it's become Big Brother and manage every click. If you want to see people leave your company, make it feel like they're being peered over their shoulder all the time. At the same point, companies need to do a better job about clearly defining what they decide is the right or wrong type of PII to be able to share. And I think every company needs to put a line in the sand and decide what they feel is appropriate or not, and then toe the line, and then people have to follow that. So anyway, and last thoughts on this, Andy, before we wrap up?
Yeah, we talked at the just in the pre-show about, hey, well, maybe this will just be a 30-minute show.
We talked 30 minutes on news. Yeah.
No, but nothing else to add on that. I think we've covered it.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up because we are at an hour, but that's okay because Karl came in, which is super fun. Thanks, Karl, for coming and hanging out. Tomorrow we have a couple more topics. Obviously, we will talk about more news. There's even some news stories that I didn't get to today. Tomorrow just is like sort of a light one. We've talked about Poe before. Poe's been around forever. I think it's time to just sort of talk about what Poe is doing, why they might be a great resource for people, for a mixture of experts, sort of going back to that same idea and theme that Andy has been talking and Karl, you've been talking about. And then we're also going to talk about this idea of training, just like we were today, but what are we expecting universities or schools to do, or any certification? It doesn't have to be a university. When last year everybody needed to be a prompt engineer, everybody needed how to prompt, and this year everybody needs to know how to create agents, and next year it'll be something else. And so, like, how do you control or manage for that? Other than to have continuous training and improvements and stuff like that. So that'll be one of the topics for tomorrow's show as well. And then we'll have topics the rest of the week. So come on back and hang out with us. Appreciate everybody being here. Thanks, Jeff and Greg and everybody else in the comments. And we will see you guys tomorrow for another great show. Until then, have a good one.